Attack on Titan is just one of those series. It has massive flesh-mechs, it has action, it has music, it has character depth and heart. It seems sometimes that everyone in the series has their own motivations, with Eren seeking freedom for himself and his people, with Zeke seeking relief for his people and the world. The Marleyeans seek revenge on the Eldians seek forgiveness and acceptance. There are as many reasons to fight as there are people fighting, but what it all boiled down to was the founding Titan, serving as the very center of the series, the McGuffin that everyone was after, and the object that ultimately would decide who got what who wanted. But I can't help but wonder what might have happened if Zeke had managed to control the founding Titan instead. Welcome to the Amagi. Before we begin, only 25% of our viewers are subscribed, so if you're a fan of the video, please like and double check if you are subscribed. And with that out of the way, let's get into it. Erwin Smith and his brave soldiers, each and every one climbed atop the remaining horses that had been left for them. In the distance, standing out against them was the Beast Titan and his horde of pure Titans. Erwin let out a massive battle cry and began to charge toward the Beast Titan and his army. His soldiers did the same. As they came rushing toward Zeke, Zeke could not help but be confused. They screamed as they charged, some in rage, others in terror, all of them coming in his direction anyway, firing smoke signals at him. It was obvious that they were attempting to block his vision, make him unable to see properly. Zeke was starting to feel a little bad about this. He crushed up more rocks and then threw them out at the enemy, attempting to destroy them as quickly as possible. Something felt off though, and he couldn't figure out what. He knew Erwin wasn't a stupid man. He knew that he only ever did whatever he thought he had to. He was strategic that way, but for him to make such a desperate move, especially when there were some other options left open, was uncharacteristic of him. Erwin was bold. He would do dangerous things at the expense of human life to attain a goal, but this almost seemed like a suicide charge. So what was it? Why was he pushing so hard? Just to die? His soldiers were getting shredded. Surely he knew this was going to happen. Why would he do this? As he crushed the next boulder to throw, he considered it. If he knew Erwin Smith, what he knew was that he likely had something else planned. So what was it? He suddenly realized that this was a diversion. Zeke began to look around. The smoke wasn't to conceal the charging forces, it was to conceal something else. He looked around and noticed that some of his Titans were going down. He watched one fall, and as it did, something zipped from one to the next. Zeke would wind up his next volley of rocks and would fling them right at the next Titan's face. He was sacrificing a Titan, but safeguarding himself. As Levi moved from Titan to Titan, he was focusing only on the napes he was attempting to carve out. Only for a moment did he notice the stony shrapnel coming at him. He attempted to avoid it all, but given that there was little to latch on through here, he had no way of properly avoiding it. He would be struck point blank by the stones, his body ripped to shreds. As his corpse fell to the ground in a bloody pulp, Erwin knew that his plan had failed. He had just led his people to their deaths for no reason. Overcome with remorse and regret, he watched as the Beast Titan wound up its arm to throw another volley of rocks. Zeke threw his hand forward and the stones flew through the air at what almost felt like sonic levels. They struck the ground round about, tossing people up into the air, and Erwin himself was struck in the side, going down hard. As he lay on the ground, he was certain that he'd be seized up in agony, but oddly, he didn't feel the pain. As his eyes closed, he imagined a place back in grade school, in his father's class, his hand being among the many to shoot up to answer a question that they'd been asked. The Beast Titan, having eviscerated the forces of Erwin Smith, having called his bluff and outbid him, began to walk toward the walls. He climbed up their side to reach the top. PX showed up beside Zeke in her cart Titan form. "What should we do now?" she asked. Zeke thought about it. "Collect Reiner. I will collect Bertolt, and I'll also retrieve Coordinate." PX Titan nodded its head in a single quick motion. Right. She raced off in another direction. Zeke began to slide down the wall and hit the ground. He began to walk toward Eren. Eren, seeing the appearance of the massive monkey-like Titan coming his way, reached down and picked up Bertolt and had him by blade point. Zeke stopped once he reached the building. He looked around and saw Armin laying there, burned and completely charred. Likely Bertolt's work. "Eren," Zeke said in a deep voice. Eren seemed confused. "Who are you?" Eren demanded. Zeke offered a slight smile. "My name is Zeke, and I am your brother." Eren seemed startled by this revelation. It was then that Zeke pulled his head from the nape of his Titan to show his true face. Eren was struck by how much this fellow looked like Grisha. One could be forgiven for thinking he was Grisha with just a fresh coat of blonde hair dye. "Eren," Zeke said again, "you don't know the truth, do you?" There are people from across the sea, and your father was one of them. I am one of them. Our people are one of the few peoples in the world capable of turning into titans. There's so much I want to show you and tell you, but we don't have time now. I need you to come with me." Eren shook his head and threatened Bertolt a little bit harder. Zeke saw this and sighed. "Eren." Suddenly, Armin let out a gasp. Eren looked over at Armin, surprised to see he was still alive. Zeke would seize upon this opportunity and would pluck the blade from Eren's fingers and then pluck from Eren's grip Bertolt. Eren would look up in shock as Zeke examined the broken warrior. He would then look at Eren. He would reach out and grab him next, but suddenly the two were transported to the paths. Zeke stood there in his physical body now, looking around. Beside him would be Eren. They would notice the large growing tree in the middle of this desert of stars. In the distance, a young girl came walking toward them. "Who is that? And how did we get here?" Eren asked. Zeke began to explain. "We are in the paths. The paths is an extra-dimensional plane that is used to connect the Eldians to the Founder." Eldians? Founder? Eren was obviously confused. Zeke began to explain. "The Eldians are a race of people. They're descended from the Founder, Ymir. That's why we can use Titan powers." "The Founder? Ymir?" Eren asked. The girl grew closer to them, holding a bucket in her hand. Zeke pointed to her. "That's the Founder Ymir." "But she's just a little girl," Eren said. Zeke nodded. Maybe that's how she decided to present herself. Eren watched as she drew closer and then walked right past them. "What is she?" Zeke then began to explain. She was the first Titan. The founding Titan was a powerful creature that was awakened a long time ago. It was believed that the founder, Ymir, found it in an old aquifer and that she bonded to the creature. When she did, it awakened a power that turned her into a force to be reckoned with, and in return she used that power to serve the king of Eldia, and after her death her powers were passed down like a curse, from Eldian to Eldian, each one bearing a Titan, unable to live longer than 13 years after having received this power. Eren was shocked. "Wait, what? 13 years? Zeke nodded. "Everyone who has taken a Titan power has died approximately 13 years after they received it. This is called the Curse of Ymir." Eren seemed startled to know this, understanding that he only had about 8 years left to live. Zeke continued. "I don't know how, but our father somehow managed to get a hold of the founding Titan, wresting it from the hands of the King of the Walls, and he gave it to you." Eren stood there silently for a moment before speaking. "Why is this Titan so important?" Zeke then began to explain. "Because it can create and control Titans, but as of yet, only under certain specific conditions. The Marleyeans desire it, to use it to create a military that can't be defeated by conventional warfare." Zeke looked up at Eren again and realized that not much was making sense to him. So Zeke began to show him memories of Marley, of the town where he grew up, the man who raised him. He showed him the wars, the memories of the Eldian. He showed him everything Eren needed to see to be caught up on the events of the world. Eren saw these things and then began to understand what the world was like beyond the walls. Zeke then spoke. "I wish to take the founding Titan to fix some issues." "How?" "The world is the way it is because of Titans. The world is scared of Titans. The world is a place of suffering for our people because they're downtrodden for being worse than they are. I want to sterilize all of the Eldian people so that they don't have to suffer through the generations to come. And in that way, we will stop having children, and thus the threat of the Titans will go away." "But that will take a lot longer than 13 years, Eren said. Zeke nodded. "Indeed. This means that the royals will need to reproduce as fast as they can. Reproduction will be something only the royal family will be able to do, along with the only other Eldian group who will work alongside the royals. We will keep the bloodline going until all other Eldians have passed away, and then we'll end the cycle. With no one left to pass the Titans to, they will simply fade away along with us." Eren shook his head. "That's madness. Nobody will agree to what you're saying." Zeke shook his head. "The Eldians will approve. After all, they have no choice but to follow the founder. And given that the Ackerman clan is mostly dead now, it's unlikely that they will resist. We only need to protect ourselves for about 100 years or so, and then the threat will go away." Eren was startled by this. "I won't allow it." Zeke shook his head. "I'm sorry, Eren, but you have no choice." Zeke turned around and began to walk toward Ymir. He raised his hand. "Founder Ymir, I am Zeke Yeager, one of the latest in the line of King Fritz. I command you to yield." The little girl stopped in her track. Suddenly, Zeke was tackled by Eren. Eren rolled across the ground with him. Zeke resisted. "Eren, stop!" Eren fought back, striking his brother in the face. "I won't let you do this!" Zeke growled and pushed Eren back before kicking him off into the sand. As soon as he hit the sand, shackles shot up out of it to chain him. Zeke stood and dusted himself off. Eren shouted and cried out, begging him to stop. Zeke looked over at him for a time. "Trust me, little brother. In time, you'll understand." He walked over to Ymir and began to speak. "Founder Ymir, as royal decree, I command you to sterilize all of your descendants so that they may never reproduce save for only the royal family, and the chosen by the royal family." Ymir stood there for a moment, and suddenly the tree behind Zeke flashed. Eren saw the flash and knew that it was true. Eren and his people were sterilized. They would never again be able to reproduce without the express permission of the royal family. Eren had fought so hard to tear down a monarchy that was corrupt and overly controlling, and now he was about to witness the rise of another. But Zeke wasn't done yet. "Founder Ymir, I have a second decree. I command that you alter the minds of all of your descendants to agree with the ideals I have mentioned here today with my brother Eren." Suddenly the tree flashed again, and as it did, Eren began to feel something change within him. His opposition to the idea faded from his mind immediately. Zeke turned around and saw Eren sitting there. "Eren, are you ready to come out of those shackles?" Eren nodded, so Zeke let them free. "I will take care of you, little brother. I love you." In the outside world, something had shifted. Every Eldian had felt two buzzes rush through them, and for a time there was a fear that the rumbling might begin. Liberia was locked down and kept under strict guard. Any other internment zones received the same treatment. The next few days that passed by did so with terror, but Willy Tiber assured everyone that the rumbling was not occurring, and that it simply meant that there was a change, and whatever it was would be a good thing. After leaving the paths, Zeke would place a set of handcuffs on himself and Eren, and the two of them would stay close together. It was not long until Mikasa caught up with them. Seeing Zeke standing there with Eren, she drew her blades and rushed at him. Zeke had not been ready for this and saw his arm severed by the blade. Zeke kicked her back and then touched the remains of his forearm to Eren as a massive blast of golden lightning fell from the sky, striking them both. As it did, a massive body began to form, a large being with a head like a monkey, but its body made of what seemed to be bones. Zeke had formed the founding titan. Within it, he regenerated. Eren was by his side the whole time. They began to make their way away from the scene. Mikasa cried out for Eren, and as the founding titan left, Floch showed up carrying Eren on his shoulder, and in his hand he carried the syringe that Levi had carried before his death. "What is that?" Floch asked in terror. "Eren." It was then that Mikasa realized that Armin was alive. She rushed over to him. "Give me the syringe," she shouted at Floch. Floch refused to do so, as he was adamant that he should only give it to Erwin Smith, as Erwin would be the only one who could possibly stop that titan. Mikasa wasn't playing games though. She was stronger than Floch and she knew that. She pounced on Floch, threatening his life with her blades. She grabbed the syringe and rushed over to Armin with it. She wasn't sure what to do after giving it to him, but she knew she had to. If she didn't, Armin would die. So she injected her friend with it, causing him to transform into a pure titan. Floch couldn't escape with Erwin on his shoulder, so he had to let Erwin go. Floch knew now that there was no chance to rescue him, and being unconscious, he likely wouldn't feel anything. Floch got out of there with Mikasa as Armin took on a titan form and proceeded to devour Erwin. Elsewhere, Pieck and Reiner witnessed Zeke's transformation and his decrees through the founding titan and grew confused. "What has he done?" Reiner asked. Pieck stood there silently for a moment. "Zeke betrayed us." "What do we do?" Reiner asked. "We get out of here. Where's Bertolt?" Reiner shook his head. Pieck then remembered that Zeke was planning to rescue Bertolt. Whether he had done so or not was up in the air. "We need to report back to Marley. Let them know what's happened." And so the two of them began to rush away from Shiganshina and head toward the wharf where a boat would be waiting for them. All the while, Zeke and his massive titan began to slowly move through Wall Maria, tearing a hole. It was about this time that Bertolt was waking up and regenerating. "What's going on?" he demanded to know. Eren saw him and attempted to attack Bertolt, but Zeke shouted at them. "Both of you, stop, behave." Neither of them had a choice but to cooperate. They continued to walk through Wall Maria until they reached the Trust district of Wall Rose. The people cried out in terror as Zeke's titan pushed through the walls and continued straight. Entering Wall Rose proper, he kept moving. He witnessed Ragako village, where there remained a single titan on its back. "That's Connie's mother," Eren said as he looked at her. Zeke took one look and willed that she became a human again, and of course she did. They passed by the remains of Castle Utgard. As they reached Walshina though, they pushed through into the Ermich district once again and passed through the walls and entered Walshina. There was only a short distance yet to go. By this time, he saw Eldian wagons and horses surrounding him. There was no way that they had the time to inform Commander-in-Chief Zachary or Commander Dot Pixis about this. This was a response from each regional governor. But as they moved, flares began being sent up. He saw the capital coming up, and the capital saw him. Standing there on the walls of the capital was the commander and his men. Cannons began to fire at him. This artillery seemed laughable, but it was a bit of a nuisance. Using the founder to issue another decree, he commanded that all Eldians become non-hostile toward him. This had effects on everyone, however. Be they on Paradise Island or anywhere else, they were controlled by the founder. The pursuing wagons became escorts leading him in. Zeke, in one day, had managed to conquer all of Eldia, becoming its new king. Entering into the capital, he would ditch his Titan form and take on the form of a human. Less damage to be done to the poor city. He took a wagon into the capital, once again having handcuffed himself to Eren. Bertolt was there as they made their way to the castle. There he entered to find Historia Reese up on the throne. Zeke would waggle his finger upward to tell her to get up. Zeke would walk over and sit down. As he sat upon the throne, he began to make himself at home. Elsewhere, as Piek and Reiner raced across the land, they no longer felt the need to fight against Zeke, but all the same, they continued back to Marley. They boarded a boat and began to sail. As they crossed over the waves, they eventually pulled into port only to see that the entirety of the Marleyan fleet was there. Getting off the boat, they would head for debriefing, where they'd begin to explain what it was that they had seen. We were facing off against the Eldians in the district of Shiganshina, and there Zeke managed to make contact with the coordinate. I'm not entirely sure what happened, but we think he took the power for himself and has begun to prepare for a lengthy standoff against the world. What does he want? Asked one of the supreme commanders of the nation. Piek sat there for a moment and thought. To die peacefully. Willie listened in as she spoke. It's a euthanasia plan, he said. The Marleyan leaders looked at each other. What do you mean, euthanasia plan? Willie thought about it. Likely, he wants to sterilize all Eldians and pacify us to keep us in check. Then, when our lives come to an end, there will be no more Eldians left to keep the Titans, therefore ending the threat. The Marleyans began to panic. Reiner was confused. I'm sorry, but why is this a bad thing? He asked. Don't you want us all to go away? The military official conducting the debriefing slammed his fist on the table. Of course we do, but the issue with that is that our great nation stands because of the fear the Titans put into everyone else. You are both our greatest liability and our greatest asset. Without the power of the Titans, Marley, who is already falling behind technologically, will fall. Willie then began to speak. Pardon the commander here, but if I'm to be transparent with you, we desired to have the founding Titan back to utilize a small-scale rumbling and prove to the world that we were still the dominant superpower. They may possess anti-Titan weapons, but those will hardly do them any good against such numbers. Reiner and Piek were troubled by this, though it was not so much of a surprise for Piek. After all, for what reason would Marley want the founder back if not to use it? So I am to take it that Mr. Jaeger has become a threat to us, the commander asked. Willie nodded. The commander then spoke. The best thing we can do is attempt to take back the founder anyway, came a new voice. They looked back to see Commander Magath standing there. What is your plan? Magath then began to explain. If Marley cannot live without its Titans, then Marley has no choice but to take them back. Whether it be a rumbling of Titans or a rumbling of foreign soldiers, Marley will fall without its Titans. We have nothing to lose. What we need to do is throw everything we have at Paradise to take back the founder, whether Zeke wants it or not. And we're going to have to do it without the use of Titans. And how do you plan to take down a Titan without Titans, they asked. Magath thought for a moment. Give him a Titan or not, Zeke is still just a man, and mankind are known for their mortality. They can die, they can be killed. I say we take a page out of the books of the other nations we fought against recently. We use the anti-Titan technology they have to take out the founder. We either succeed or die trying. There's no other choice than that. The military official thought about it. Fine. Your squad botched this mission and you can clean it up. You will be promoted to general. You have full use of all of Marley's resources. Just make it happen. And with that, the debriefing turned war room meeting ended. General Magath began to put together plans and gather allies and resources. Together they would return to Paradise with their war blimps. They would begin by sending in scouts. Many were killed by Titans, but quite a few got in and managed to sneak their way to the capital. They would set up their radios in secret under their houses. They would keep an eye open for Zeke to scope out what he had done. They would report back that Zeke was indeed in the capital and that Eren Jaeger was still alive. As soon as Magath heard that, he was filled with hope. He knew that because Eren Jaeger was still alive, this likely meant that Zeke could not use the founding Titan on his own, and that meant he was vulnerable. He asked the scouts he had sent in if they could get a shot on him or not, but the scouts never answered. Magath could only assume that they'd been captured, which meant that the attack had to happen that night. So they waited for night to come. Thankfully, the sky was overcast. They ascended as high as their blimps could go and sailed across the sky under cover of darkness. There was a low hum to the cities below, but nobody really thought much about it. They sailed over each district and wall until they reached where they were going. They prepared for their assault. Within the city though, Mikasa waited. She knew the Marleyeans were coming. The scout tied up behind her had said as much. This was good. It gave her a chance to get in. Mikasa thought back to the moments that had led to this. After Zeke had left with Eren, she and Hanji had met up together and began to discuss why it was that Zeke was able to use the Founder without Eren's help. They managed to get into the basement of the Jaeger household and they discovered what Grisha had written. They realized that Zeke was a royal due to his mother having been descended from King Fritz. They theorized that what was going on was due to Eren not being a royal. He couldn't utilize the Founding Titan's power. But having realized that the Titan that Eren punched earlier during his escape from Reiner and Berthold's clutches was most likely Dina Fritz, Grisha's first wife, it became clear to Hanji that non-royals couldn't utilize the Founding Titan, but it was possible if a royal with Titan powers were to make contact first. And that was what Zeke had done. He had made contact with Eren and had forced him to use the Founding Titan to change the way everyone behaved. By this time, Hanji was no longer willing to help, meaning Mikasa was on her own. But she knew that if Berthold was still there, that she could kill Zeke and then incapacitate Berthold and take his Titan from him and give it to Historia, who could then undo the damage done. The biggest issue though was getting in. But with the Marleyeans here, she might be able to slip through unannounced. If she took out Zeke during this time and had Historia and Eren touch, they could utilize the Founding Titan to defeat the Marleyan. Then, anything else after that could be decided when everyone was back to their right senses. Thinking back on Armin, she knew that the first thing she would do when peace was restored was ask Historia to make him human again. With Connie's mother having been returned to normal, much to Connie's joy, Mikasa knew that the Founder had that ability. So she waited. There was a low hum over the city and she knew what it meant. She looked back at the Marleyan scout and pulled a knife. He saw it, panicked, and closed his eyes, but she cut his bonds and ungagged him. He was surprised. He looked at her. What? She then spoke. Return to your people. Get to safety. I don't care. Just stay out of my way. She let him go. Walking to the wall, she refreshed her ODM gear's fuel tanks and then put them on and grabbed fresh blades. As the Marleyeans began parachuting in, a panic arose in the city as the military police and garrison corps began going into action. The Marleyeans utilized their bolt-action rifles, all while the military police had only just now started using the same type of ODM gear that Kenny's group had. It slowly became a war zone outside, and the guards from the castle started to pour out. Mikasa, now wearing a pilfered military police jacket, began to make her way to the castle where she stood. She knew that chances were Zeke wouldn't start off with the Founding Titan. He would likely send Berthold out to face off against the Marleyeans first to try and limit the damage done to the city. That was what was best. Mikasa snuck into the castle and managed to blend in with her military police uniform. Just as predicted, Berthold exited the castle, got a good distance away, and transformed into the Colossal Titan in a safe manner as to not destroy everything. They began focusing fire on him. Berthold would begin tossing various things at the blimps that had yet to drop anything in hopes of destroying them before they could deploy. As this happened, McGuffin began to curse as he loaded his pistol from the ground, having also parachuted in. They've turned the Colossal Titan against us. The ground shook and rumbled within the castle as Zeke and Eren stood there. They were well protected and barricaded in. Mikasa couldn't even get close from this angle. The room they had retreated to was underground with no windows and only one way in. Mikasa was wearing a uniform, but there was no way that she could get through the barricade. And even if she did, she would have a hard time attacking Zeke without him noticing. They needed a distraction. She exited the building, put her ODM gear back on, and began to zip around the city again, attempting to avoid being shot by Marleyeans. She began to look for a way to get in. She saw Berthold there and saw that his positioning had actually specifically lined up to protect the outer wall where Zeke and Eren were hiding. If she could knock him off balance somehow, she knew that he would fall into the building and at least provide a way in. She knew that if she didn't do this correctly, Eren would likely be killed, but now she had no choice. Either he would maybe get killed or he would be killed. Those were the only options. So she decided to choose maybe. She realized that the Marleyeans had dropped in an artillery cannon. She watched as they loaded and fired it. She watched them do so twice to make sure she knew what to do. She then snuck in, killed them off, and loaded up the cannon herself. She then looked over the controls and learned how to readjust the settings. Considering how the bullet had flown and landed, this had to be no different than any other cannon she knew, just stronger. So she aimed higher, accounted for the wind and the odd cylindrical shape of the cannonball, and let loose the artillery. The cannon fired and the shell hit its mark, right in Berthold's left eye. The explosion caused him to stumble back into the building and fall, devastating the castle. Mikasa then took to the air with her ODM gear and began making her way back toward the castle. But by this time, word began circulating that the Eldians had a traitor among them, and she was identified by her red scarf. Mikasa would be shot at, but now the military police was after her as well. She would swing her way through the front door of a shop and would land on her feet before somersaulting over the counter. She landed there and saw a loaded musket and noticed silverware that gave off a bit of reflection. Something within her told her that this was advantageous, so she waited. She saw the military police soldiers come in. "Come out, Mikasa, we know you're in there," the head one said. She waited a moment until it was right. She then pulled back the hammer on the rifle. Everyone stopped moving at the sound of the click. She then threw the barrel over the top of the bar, pulled the trigger, and fired. The musket took out the leader of the squad and sent them all into disarray. She would leap out over the top of the bar and rush over to begin gutting each of them with the speed and precision of a ninja. With them out of the way, she would sneak back out of the building and continue upon her way. Bertolt was still down and likely unconscious for the time being. She snuck right past him. It was so hot near him, like walking into a furnace. She knew that Eren and Zeke likely couldn't get out any other way. She made it into the hole she created and then to safety. Zeke turned around. Thank heavens, the military police. As the dust settled, he saw Mikasa. He went to touch Eren, but she quickly beheaded Zeke before he could and then cut the chain connecting him to Eren. With Eren free, she looked back to make sure he was okay. Hearing the guards try to bust the door down, she turned back to escape with Eren the other way, but at this time she saw Bertolt getting back up again. They were trapped. We're going to die, she thought. She looked at Eren, tears in her eyes, knowing she failed to rescue him. But in this last moment, she decided to confess. Eren, I love you. I've always loved you, and I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. She kissed him, and as she did, he was surprised. He seemed to snap back to reality. It was then that he realized what was going on. He pushed her away from him. Mikasa was confused. Eren? He looked at her and then pulled a knife. Stay back. I'm going to transform. Mikasa looked around the room. She was afraid that such a transformation would bring the whole roof down upon them, but then again, the roof was coming down anyway. She nodded. Eren then took the knife in his hand and sliced it open. He suddenly transformed into the Attack Titan, and in this form he grabbed her, the two managing to get past Bertolt. Mikasa spoke. We need to find Historia. Where is she? Eren grunted as he came back around and busted into the castle in another way. They found Historia sitting there in a prison cell and broke her free. Grabbing her, they began to escape. As they ran out, Mikasa asked Eren to stick his head out of the Titan. He did so. She would then take some spinal fluid from him and put it into a syringe. She then looked at Eren. I need you to do something. I need you to get into position. I'm going to commandeer another cannon. You need to grab Bertolt's leg while I shoot him in the back of the skull. We need to topple him. The Attack Titan nodded. Mikasa put Historia in a safe place. She then took over another cannon and prepared to fire. She waited until Eren was ready, and then shot. The blast struck the Colossal Titan in the back of the head, causing it to fall forward. Eren, grabbing its foot, did not allow it to support the Colossal's weight any further. He let the whole thing fall to the ground. As soon as it did, Mikasa rushed over with her ODM gear, came up from behind and cut the nape open, pulling out Bertolt. With him pulled out, she would rush back to Historia. Historia seemed pale, knowing that she was about to eat this man. Mikasa would inject Historia and run. As Historia took a Titan form, she saw Bertolt and then devoured him, becoming the Colossal Titan's next user. With her free, they didn't have much time. She would then have to meet with Eren, where she would then touch him and rescind all of the decrees that Zeke had made. She would then give control to Eren, who would transform them into the Founding Titan and use it to turn all Eldians around into Colossal Titans. As the Titans began to rise, they started to push back the Marleyeans. Utterly defeated, the Marleyeans would have to retreat. Eren and Historia would then launch a miniature rumbling to destroy the military might of Marley and to make a point. This ended the war before it truly began. Many had died that night in the capital, but because of their sacrifice, the rest of paradise could be free. Eren and Historia would return to the capital, where she would resume her position as queen. However, it became Eren's duty to stay close to her at all times, and he did so for the remainder of his 13-year term. During this time, he would marry Mikasa, and the two would have a child together. After this, Jon would replace Eren as the next Founding Titan. They would keep the cycle going. Eventually, the world did catch back up with technology, and Titans were no longer a threat. That happened the moment the world learned to split the atom. When that did happen, however, Paradise was the first target. The Age of Titans would end, and the Age of Nuclear Power would replace it. A new type of fear overtook the world, and in the most dangerous time in history, the world regained balance. Years later, as regimes changed and nations, empires, and kingdoms fell and were replaced, historians would record the history of the Eldians, the subjects of Ymir, and a certain level of sorrow would be shown for them, realizing they were just ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances, trying to survive. A good few Eldians who had survived due to being in the internment camps would be freed to return to their island after it had been cleared of any nuclear waste, and Paradise would once again return. Despite this, the power of the Titans never did return. The truth remains unknown, only that where Shiganshina once stood, a single tree looms like a tower in the middle of nowhere, waiting for some curious explorer to come seeking the treasures within. And that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. To be frank, the narrative of Attack on Titan insinuates that there was no way for the Eldians to escape destruction unless they issued the full rumbling. But in this universe, that doesn't happen. This would result in the total destruction of paradise. As sad as it is, that's pretty much what Attack on Titan says would happen. It was the whole reason why Eren did what he did. He didn't want to, but felt that he had to. According to him, there was no other way but to do it. But what do you think? Did you enjoy the video? If so, leave a comment and tell us so, and while you're at it, click that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos as they drop. And here's 2 other videos to tide you over until the fresh meat drops. Until then, peace out.